Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with Scott Ritter, and it's Thursday morning, and so this all this talk about a deal or no deal, musical chairs, everybody's meeting with everybody. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with Scott Ritter. Before we get going, let's start looking at what Scott Ritter's up to and how you can keep up with all of Scott's good work. Scott, what's happening?
No, I mean, I just got back from 8 eventful days in Russia, where I think I did over 30 interviews. We're starting to release those interviews on my Substack page and on my Telegram channel, the Russia House. These interviews, are again an important part of capturing the reality of Russia and bringing it to an American audience, so that people are more informed about things that the mainstream media won't tell you about Russia. I'm sure we're going to get into this peace deal coming up, and it's just sort of funny to watch how the West spins away nonsense. The Russians just stay the course. The West lives in the fantasy land of their own making. That's populated with nonsense because they refuse to accept the Russian reality, because they refuse to accept Russia. And, the culprit is Russophobia. And so what I'm trying to do through, these interviews and other work is to provide an antidote to the poison of Russophobia, so people can think clearly. So that's been my big effort. Now I'm home, working on potential, future trip in November to continue this work. And, now Project 38 is kicking in. We have a big planning organizational session in Poughkeepsie. Dennis Kucinich is going to host it. And, we're going to begin, the interview process and such, so that we can stay on track for our December, timeline, where we want to brief the President of the United States on the necessity of not just extending the New START treaty, but I think we also need to incorporate what are we doing about these INF systems, these intermediate range systems. Russia's put the Oreshnik missile into serial production. They're starting to deploy it. There's new systems coming out. It's just as destabilizing today as it was when we had the original INF crisis back in the late 70s and early 80s. So just a lot of work to be done. A lot of work to be done.
I'll say, Scott. So let's get started here. You brought up something very important, and this is something I've been thinking about. Sometimes you look at two people talking, and one person is calm and steady and centered. The Russians, look, this is what we gave you in December 17th, I believe, of 2021, a list of things, the root causes, right? What do you want to do? Look back at that list. A year later, how could we look back at that list right now? We need to talk to you about some. Look back at that list. Root causes. They have a compass pointed north, and root causes is up there, in north. Okay. Meanwhile, the other side's all over the place. Now it seems like Trump is not so much all over the place. He's kind of said, yeah, we're gonna have to go with what the Russians want. Your thoughts on the situation in the West, in that the Russians are, here's where we are. And they got Chinese and they got their allies that are all like, hey, this is what the Russians are saying. And then on the other side, there's this cacophonous kind of group all singing in a different, different keys, shall we say. Your thoughts on that?
I think you hit the nail on the head. The consistency of the Russian argument hasn't changed at all over time. We keep hearing talk about Russian concessions, but they're a concession of process, but they're not a concession of substance. Russia hasn't changed its position at all. I have to laugh when I hear people in the Trump administration, senior people, make ridiculous statements like, Russia, is willing to, they want the Donbass back, but they're willing to concede territory in Kherson and Zaporizhia. And I'm just like, no. I mean, do people understand that Vladimir Putin doesn't have the authority to do that? I mean, he's a president. He's not a dictator. Russia doesn't belong to him. Russia belongs to the Russian people, and they have a constitution. And the territories that were absorbed by Russia in 2022 now are considered Mother Russia legally, constitutionally. And the president has no authority to give it away, nor would he, at any negotiation. So I just have to wonder, this is the importance of the Russian reality. It's the same thing. Putin's going to invade Ukraine back in 2022. And I said, maybe, but not until there's things that have to happen. There's a process. He has to go to the Duma. He has to brief the Duma. The Duma will have to approve it. Then it comes back to him. He signs off. He gives the orders. But until that process has happened, they're not invading tomorrow. This is a multi-day process. And sure enough, he did all that. Then he signed off, and then the Russian military went in. But people could have saved themselves a lot of angst and anxiety simply by knowing about Russia, knowing the truth about Russia. Russia will never yield its territory. End of story. Russia says no NATO in Ukraine. Well, what part of that don't you understand? When people talk about Article 5 protection, you're just faking it to make it. What you want NATO without NATO? And Russia's like, no, that's not going to happen. Lavrov just said, no, that's just literally not going to happen. We won't allow it to happen. But even the West can't agree upon it. I mean, all these people came up to the White House and Article 5 like protection, but it can't happen without American backing. And America's like, well, no, we really don't want to get involved in this now. So they live in a fantasy world. The humiliation of continuing to arm Ukraine, but it requires Europe to buy weapons from the United States and then send them to Ukraine. But they don't get to buy it off the shelf. This isn't like you and I going to Walmart and going, that's a good looking steak there. Not that you'd buy your steak from Walmart, but let's work with me here. Giving away a secret. Yes, I do buy steak from Walmart on occasion. But they have to order from a catalog because it hasn't been made yet. So the weapons they're buying for Ukraine don't exist, and they won't exist for many, many years. So it's ludicrous. But the other thing is Russia knows. I mean, they're smart enough to know that they just have to wait for Zelensky to commit suicide, which he's doing today. No to the Russian language. If I recall, when Zelensky was running for president, he bragged about how he spoke Russian. I am Jewish. I speak Russian, but I am Ukrainian. Okay. And then he said, the people in the East, in Crimea, they speak Russian. Let them. Leave them alone. That's the guy that ran for president. The guy that is president today is banning the Russian language. And that's just a non-starter for the Russians. The whole concept of denazification isn't just the elimination of the ideology of Stepan Bandera, but it's also constitutionally protecting the Russian people who live in what will be called Ukraine. That means that their language, they get to speak, their religion, they get to practice, their history gets respected. But, right now, Zelensky's tearing down Soviet memorials. They're closing down the Russian Orthodox Church, turning it into some sort of satanic cult, and then, banning the Russian language. If you actually think that that's a recipe for peace with Russia, then you don't know Russia very well.
Well, and here's the issue too. There are certain things that in a way can't happen. That's why I think to some extent there's going to be a lot of negotiation, but I think it has to be slow. And I think the Russians have to be quite frank. It has to be slow, and the Russians have to continue to pound Ukraine into submission, in my opinion, because so you're saying, okay, just what we just talked about. Okay, they are oppressing the Russian language, culture, religion, etc. Right? Oh, I want you to stop. They're doing it in the Baltics. You know what I mean? Look at the Baltics. They're, oh, well, let's get rid of so that you got people goose stepping all over the place with Nazi outfits on. They are outlawing Russians from owning property. If you don't do certain things, you're literally thrown out of the country. So the Baltics and some of those areas are doing the exact same thing as Ukraine. So how can you possibly believe that Ukraine, when it's, Nazi sponsors are going in the direction of Nazism? That's why I think they got to move slow, and the Russians got to continue to just pound them into submission, because that's the only thing I think really will work. And I think the Russians understand that.
Oh, well, of course they do. Just look what they struck either last night, I think it was last night or this morning. In Western Ukraine, Flex Industries, a major electronics manufacturing entity in the United States, that doesn't make coffee makers. Let me just make it clear. They make defense electronics. They make electronics for aerospace and for defense. They do that for the United States. And Flex has built a major plant in Western Ukraine. It's been operating. And this plant supplies advanced, sophisticated electronics for Ukraine's drone program and for their missile program. It's an American company, and it just disappeared. It was erased by the Russians, who are sending a signal that, for all you people who think that, when this conflict's over, you're going to come in and build things you're not. We control Ukraine. Nobody else controls Ukraine. We control Ukraine. And the Russians are starting to hit other things. They took out a major oil refinery that Azerbaijan was using to process its oil into product that could be sold to Europe. Azerbaijan, of course, is thumbing its nose at Russia, creating provocation in the southern Caucasus as part of a Western-led plan. And the Russians just put the Azerbaijanis on notice that, no, you don't. And they erased it. It's gone. And you combine that fact with the other difficult fact for the Azerbaijani, that all their oil is contaminated with chlorides, and refineries are rejecting it. Azerbaijan's losing $100 million plus a day in revenue because of this, because their oil sucks. Ukraine was willing to process it because Ukraine will do anything for money, but that capability has been eliminated. The Russians are striking additional sites. The bottom line is Russia is going to flatten Ukraine. I think we're at the point, and you and I have been saying this, that there will come a point where negotiations just become futile. Look, Russia got what it wanted from Trump. I mean, it's amazing how Trump would just pound the table. There must be a ceasefire. Vladimir Putin doesn't agree to a ceasefire immediately. I'm out of there, and we're going to sanction him. And then they had a little 2-hour drive in the Beast, and Trump comes out and goes, no ceasefire. We're just going to go with the Russian narrative here of comprehensive peace. And all of his advisors are like, what happened? What happened is Putin laid down the law, told him what ground truth reality is. And now the United States, even Marco Rubio, who's just a neocon straight through, is saying, we're not gonna sanction Russia, because if we do, that's the end of the peace process.
And they're also saying we're not going to tariff China. Also, they're like, when Trump came out of there and they said, "Oh, are you going to put bone-crushing sanctions on China?" He's like, "Nah."
Because he's losing.
Be suicide. Be political suicide.
So, it's over for Ukraine now. It's literally over. The Magnificent Seven strode into the White House. And then they sat there while Daddy lectured them, humiliated them. I'm going to go call Putin. No, you shouldn't call Putin. I'm calling Putin. And then Putin just slammed the door on him and said, no, we're not doing any of that stuff they recommend. He comes back and goes, we're not doing any of that stuff you guys are talking about. Have a good day. Goodbye. The Russian army today, I mean, I loved what you said. Every day you wake up and you open up the news and the Russian flag is flying over some new village you can't pronounce. Well, today it's flying over 7 new villages you can't pronounce. They're dominating across the board. It turns out, we took a lot of heat for, calling out the casualties, the number of dead. And now they hacked the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, and it turns out the casualties are even worse than what we had said, 1.7 million dead and missing. But when you reverse engineer that, right about the time that I said that the Ukrainians crossed the million threshold is when they crossed the million threshold. Guys, if you know war, you know how war works. And I've told everybody from day one, when you evaluate the lethality dispensing technology over terrain and concentration, all that stuff, you can pretty much get a good idea about, who's dying and what. And it turns out the Russians are in fact sustaining 13 to 20 kill advantage ratios, meaning that for every
Well, one
Russian
quick
died.
question, and I guess you would know this. When you look at the number of KIA, how do you multiply? What kind of factor do you use to say how many people are wounded? I mean, when I mean wounded, I mean taken out of action. So if it's, is it 5 to 1, 2 to 1, 3 to 1? From that 1 point, extrapolating from that 1.7 million, how many wounded taken out of action do we guess that number looks like?
Well, one of the reasons why that number is so high is that the Ukrainians absolutely suck at evacuating their wounded. What we should have seen, to be honest, is a figure. It still would be very high, but we should be seeing a figure around 700,000 dead. But we have something called the golden hour in combat. You get blasted if they can get you out of the front line into surgery in that hour. I mean, you may not walk again. You may be screwed up your entire life, but you could live. The United States does the golden hour better than anybody. The Russians do a good job too. They're very extensive training on, you get wounded, they wrap you up, they evacuate you, and then they get you out. All throughout the zone of conflict, there's these clinics in almost every town in Donetsk and Lugansk. Military clinics that are staffed with, medical personnel. And those soldiers come off the line and they get taken straight to a clinic where life-saving medical intervention is done, and then they're evacuated further in. So the Russians, do the golden hour, which is why their KIA are much lower, because they're saving a lot of lives through, rapid medical intervention. Yeah, with the drones have made it tough. The problem with the drone warfare is it's hard to get guys out of the line of contact because the drones now extend to 20 kilometers deep. So as you're trying to evacuate people, the drones are hitting you, and it brings the casualty ratio up a little bit in terms of dead and wounded. But the Ukrainians suck. The Russians, as they advance right now, they're taking over these villages where they're raising the flags. And, one of the last buildings they take in each village is where the Ukrainians have taken their wounded. And what the Russians are saying now is that they're going in and they're just seeing dozens of bodies. These are the wounded that couldn't be evacuated. And the Ukrainians just gave them, pumped up the morphine and killed them. And that's it. This is why the numbers are so high, which means that the actual wounded ratio it drops. It should be, 3 to 1 in terms of wounded, given all the factors that are in here. But right now, I think the wounded to dead ratio for the Ukrainians is probably closer to 1.5, which means that the Ukrainians have, over 2 million wounded. And now you know why they're running out of manpower, because it's not just the dead, it's the wounded. The Russians have suffered, casualties as well. This is a very intensive war, but let's say it's a 10 to 1 kill ratio. That's on the low end. The Ukrainians have suffered 1.7 million dead. That means the Russians have suffered 170,000 dead. That's a way too high number, The Russian dead is probably starting to just crest over 100,000. Still a lot. All of World War II, America lost, between 300 and 400,000 dead in both theaters of war. The Russians now are probably cresting over 100,000 dead. They're probably busting, 500,000 wounded. Big casualties. This is a big war. People tend to forget that. It's a big war. It's war fought on a scope and scale that General Cavoli, the NATO commander before he was replaced by Chris Donahue, said NATO could never even imagine. NATO, the big boys preparing for the big fight. They couldn't imagine the violence. And this was in 2022. What's happening today is even worse. I just, when I was in Russia, I spoke to Abdi Aladanov. I spoke to Yan Gagin. He's the military advisor to Denis Pushilin. I spoke to a guy who commands one of the big drone units, just to brag a little bit. This watch.
Uh-huh.
I mean, this is a combat diver's watch. Very well made, but it's from the drone unit. You see that little bird up there?
Oh, wow.
The petrol there, the bird flashing. That's the unit symbol, and they inscribed it to me. And now I got a cool watch from Frontline Commander.
Oh.
But Yeah, I think it's cool. I'm bragging about it
Yeah,
because
that's
it's watch.
bad. Well, I'm a
I
watch
keep
person. I
looking
love
at them.
watches.
Yeah, I
I'm a
keep
big
looking at it
watch
going,
person.
well, this is a cool watch.
Yeah.
This is a really cool one. And then I read the inscription on the back, and it's just a great. Uh, it's military brotherhood, good stuff. But he's describing the warfare that's taking place. If you move, you die today. If you move, you die. Both of them have been wounded. I mean, in drone warfare today, you're going to get wounded. You're going to get wounded. That's the bottom line. All of these Russians have holes in them that are put in by the near misses. The drone, even when you shoot the drone down, it blows up.
Right.
Yang Gagin was delivering stuff to the front line together with another friend of mine, a dentist, his driver, and they got attacked by drones, and they each of them got 4 to 5 holes in them, and the drones had some sort of chemical agent because the wounds. I mean, you have the hole, which you normally expect, but then big burns developed over his body that retained scar because they put the Ukrainians are coating it with chemicals, and we've seen the Ukrainians do it. But my point is, this drone warfare, it's just mind-boggling. I'm trying to wrap my head around it. I think I got it, but I don't, because even when I think I understand what's going on, I don't comprehend the fact that drones dominate every aspect of this fight. Where we used to stack grenades for the close-in fight, they're stacking drones. I mean, they're like the enemy's like right across the street. They'll pull out a drone, stack it up, stick it on it, take it off, fly it over there, bam, fly it in, get another one, get it up and going. The counter drone warfare, the whole thing. You. This is why they won't let me near the front line, because I was like, hey, I'd like to come in and talk to you guys, meet some of your soldiers and all that. And like, no, because the reality is, if you're operating within that dead zone, the drone zone, you're going to get a hole in you. And they're like, we're not letting you get a hole in you. And I'm like, thank you. I don't really want to get a hole in me. But we in the West don't understand this. We don't understand this at all. The simplicity of thought that takes place in our decision makers is beyond belief, and it just gets more complicated going overhead. I mean, I don't think we've quite comprehended what the Iskander missile is nowadays, because when I was in, they had the earlier version of the Iskander, and they also had the Tochka. These were battlefield support weapons, meaning they were used to take out command and control facilities. They were used to take out big value targets because they were sort of like expensive. Russians today are using them like just a normal round of ammunition. They're out there. The drones are out there. The third, the Nazis, the Azov, that become the 3rd Assault Brigade. They brought in a bunch of guys. Drones saw it. Iskander is immediately fired. The Iskander has become a tactical weapon, meaning it's where before you'd call an artillery or an airstrike, the Iskander is just sitting there, and as soon as they detect it, bam, fired, hit, precision, take out. That's a different kind of warfare too, because now what it's doing is taking the operational lethality and bringing it down to the tactical level. So now you have the drones that are just slaughtering everybody, and anybody that survives the drones getting hit by the big guns that normally wouldn't have been that low. It's a different kind of war, and nobody in the West understands this. I don't think nobody. You got to have an open mind and sit there and talk to these people, and even the Russians. It takes a lot to drag it out of them, not because they're secret, but because it's hard to explain. And you got to have the patience to sit there and listen to them and understand that we don't fight with 11 and 15 man squads anymore. They fight with 3-man teams. Why? Drones. Because they're going to get holes in them. And if you put 15 guys together, you're going to lose those 15 guys. So you have to disperse everybody. Artillery doesn't fire in mass anymore. You have a gun here, a gun there, and they're all camouflaged. Now, thanks to modern technology, you can have 5 guns spread out and still mask the fires if necessary. Right. But the point is, the way I was trained in artillery with, the guns online, the gun line, they'd all be dead. Tanks, the whole way we train in tank warfare, bringing the tank in column, all this stuff. Russians are like, if you do that, all your tanks are going to be dead that quick, because a drone swarm is going to come in and hit you. Tanks now come in individually. Anytime the Russians put several vehicles together, they get in trouble. That's why they've now gone to primarily infantry. I asked the guy, I said, are you running out of tanks? Because, it's a lot of heavy infantry assaults. He went, No, we got lots of tanks, but the infantry is the most survivable thing on the battlefield right now. Tank ain't survivable. So we use infantry, but we've changed the entire way the entire approach. Infantry will not assault without drone support at every level: electronic warfare, scout, reconnaissance, overwatch, drone interceptor drones. So that when the other drone comes in, your drone is hitting them, and then of course your own FPV firepower drones that are out there. The war has changed.
Yeah. Something else I think that is important, I think, and this is where the Russians, when you talk to them, they see warfare holistically. What I mean is on the battlefield, politically, diplomatically, industrially. They see their whole everything that has to be done at war, right? As an example, the I just saw where the Russians are the I think interior ministers and the foreign ministers of India are coming to Moscow. They're meeting with high-ranking people. Now, the U.S. was like, okay, India's going to have to suffer. Now, Russia and India are coming together, huddling together. How are we going to do this? Oh, China. They're now India and China. All right. And, the Russians always, for a long time, the Russians have been doing everything they could to bring India and China together, right? But what you see is the response to, like, whether it's the tariffs or sanctions or whatever, there is a response to that you know what I mean? As just like there's a response to something moving on the battlefield, it's like, okay, let's meet with China, let's meet with Russia. That holistic area where they see diplomatically, there's a massive response. And I think the West doesn't kind of get, they push at this country and push at that country. Russia responds by bringing them together. Your thoughts on that?
Well, as much as Russia's dominating the battlefield, they're dominating the diplomatic battlefield too. I mean, this is just one victory after another. Trump has done more damage to American goals and objectives. I don't support the American goals and objectives, but I mean, he's the president. He's going to establish them, and he's sabotaging them. As you said, only Donald Trump could bring India and China together right now, and they're not. And they're not meeting. This tentative. They're coming together, going, we got to start working together because that idiot out there is trying to sanction us, sanction you, undermine trade, BRICS, the whole thing. I think India just fell in love with BRICS. I mean, India is just sitting there going, yep, BRICS, BRICS, BRICS. Why? Because BRICS will never sanction us. BRICS will never tariff us. BRICS is about building our economy. And it's not like they're sitting there going, oh, gee, now we have to buy, Cold War stuff. The Russians are like, we got really advanced fighters. The Chinese are going, so do we. Ours might even be a little bit better. And India's going, cool, we'll take them. We'll S-400, double down. We'll do that. The U.S. isn't going to sell us Patriots anymore. What? No F-35s to break down on our runway? Gosh, but you give us the Su-57. We're in. Sign us up. And now oil. I mean, India's just like, no. India's got a good thing going here. Yeah. They went from 2% to 52% in terms of the percentage of oil that they were getting from Russia. But Europe just destroyed it because Europe is thirsty for energy.
Right.
I mean, the biggest stupidity is Europe going, we're cutting ourselves off from Russian oil. We're so big and bad, but no, we got to keep buying it directly anyways. Don't tell anybody that we still get 27% of our energy from Russia in the midst of all the, 19th round of sanctions. You still get 27% of energy. Don't talk to me about that. We're not going to sanction that because we have to have it. Meanwhile, the United States blows up Nord Stream pipeline, cheap Russian gas, and now we're shipping in liquid natural gas that Europe doesn't have the facilities to receive and process and incorporate. But when they do buy it, it's 3 to 4 times more expensive than Russian energy. So the Europeans wonder why they're running out of money. Meanwhile, India buys this cheap Russian oil, refines it, touches it. All you have to do is touch it enough, transforms it into a product that it then sells to Europe at a significant so India's making lots of money and Europe's just going bankrupt. They're just literally bleeding all their money out. This is because all sides are working together. But, India, had a dream of being part of the West, G20. They'd like to become part of the G, whatever number you want to call it, get back to the G8 if India joins. But the West won't invite them. The West treats them like dirt. And I think India's now woken up. Donald Trump dismissed them one too many times. And the Indians are going, okay. So they're repairing relations with China. They just doubled down with Russia. China's doing the same thing. Russia and China have, increased their strategic cooperation. I mean, China will never want for energy. That's for sure.
Right.
And Russia's like, okay, we're making money. Despite all the sanctions, the Russian economy grew 3% last year. I mean, it's not bad since the whole world's sanctioning them. It grew. Imagine when the sanctions are lifted, what's going to happen to the Russian economy? Through the roof. So this happened because of diplomacy. This happens because Vladimir Putin, first of all, listens to people. I'll give you a great example of listening. In 2022, they had in St. Petersburg, right before the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, they had a Russia-Africa summit, and African leaders came over. And one of them was the leader from Burkina Faso, the captain with the cool beret.
Ibrahim Traore, yeah.
And he sat down with Putin and said, we need nuclear power. We need nuclear power because if we need to have energy to transform our country. And, I imagine that in the history of Burkina Faso, at some point in time, they probably told the French, hey, we'd like one of those fancy French nuclear reactors. And the French said, nah, your job is to sell us uranium at 8 cents a kilo, and so that we can resell it for $200 a kilo, and you'll stay poor forever and we'll become rich. And this guy finally got tired. They kicked the French out, took over the uranium. He said, now to turn Burkina Faso into a modern state with good paying jobs, good infrastructure, producing things, we need energy. And Putin went, okay, well, Russia's building them a nuclear reactor because Russia listens and then Russia does. That's the difference. And there's no strings attached. Russia didn't come and say, well, you got to give us a drone base. Well, you got to do this. Well, you got to vote for us in the United Nations on things that have nothing to do with your country. Russia came and said, you want a nuclear reactor? Where you want to put it? Right here? Good. We'll build it for you. That's the difference between Russia. South Africa. Lavrov went to South Africa and just listened. They listened. The Russians listen and they hear. It's not just about listening. They hear, they understand, they comprehend. Right after that, this is back in Biden time, but Tony Blinken went there and sat down with the South African foreign minister. And she said, you guys don't get to dictate. We would never dictate to you at all. That's the last thing we would do. No, we respect your sovereignty. As he's saying that, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, I forget what her name was, big black lady, flies to
Greenfield, whatever, hyphenated thing.
So she flies to Uganda and sits there and goes, if you trade with Russia, we will sanction you. And Blinken's in South Africa going, shh, come on, don't say the stuff out loud. I'm trying to blow smoke at her right now. Tell her we don't do that. And then you're there doing it because that's what America does. We suck at diplomacy. I guess it's a good thing that we're cutting the State Department down by 1/3. I mean, normally I'd say that's a bad thing, but since we don't do diplomacy, probably a good thing. That creates more room for citizen diplomats like you and me. So we can travel across and tell the world, hey, that government, understand they change every 4 years. We, the people, we don't. You want to be friends with us, and then let us vote for better government. But, Russia's mastered diplomacy. So the same way they're dominating the battlefield, they're dominating the world diplomacy. The United States is more and more isolated. I mean, even our allies that we have, Europe, they're not our allies. They stab us in the back every single time. The only friend, I'll make this statement. I'll turn off your comments because I'm sure I'm going to just get a whole.
We'll ignore them. They freak
out.
But
the only friend the United States has today is Russia. I just spent a week in Russia. They are so much pulling for Donald Trump because they want peace. They want peace. They want good relations. They're tired of this nonsense. They'll never abandon Putin. He's 85% approval rating. And their motto is peace through victory, meaning that there won't be peace through surrender. Peace through victory. They're going to win the war. You can't change that. But if you want peace after the war, they're ready. And are so open to having good relations with the United States. And they've said it. We're the only friends you have. We're the best friend you have. We like you. We want to work with you. But you sit there and keep going back to Macron and Starmer and Maloney and all these people who stab you in the back, who don't like you. And why? Vladimir Putin is the best friend Donald Trump has right now in the world today, the best friend. And he will work with the United States to get deals that are mutually beneficial. Hopefully Donald Trump realizes this and, takes the offered hand of peace.
Well, you could look at Alaska, the visuals, right? And there's Putin and Trump, and they're shaking hands, and they're riding in the big Cadillac, and they look like a couple of guys that are just, heading over to the bar to have a cold beer together. That they look, the body language, everything was, I like this guy. Yeah, it was both of them kind of look like we're a couple of tough guys. You know what I mean? We're real guys. We're old school guys, right? That's what I looked at. And when I saw this meeting in the Oval Office, here's what I see. Number one, Donald Trump despises them. And one of the reasons he despises them is because they're weak, and he does not like weak people. I always say this: alpha men hate weak guys. And I'm not going to say I'm an alpha male. I don't know. I know this. I don't like weak guys. So I understand that feeling. You know what I mean? It's like, come on, be a man. You know what I mean? Come on, don't be a chump. You know what I mean? And when you couldn't get weaker than people. You don't come into it. I don't care who it is. I don't care if some guy's like, I'm going to shoot you. You're like, dude, you're going to have to shoot. Nothing I can do about that, but I ain't going to kiss your ass first, right? But you don't come into the office before another man and say, oh, please, boss. I mean, even their voices were soft and compliant. Yes, we hope that you hope. You're going to talk to another guy and say you hope that he'll do. And if you could work with us, and I'm like, I couldn't watch it because I wanted to throw up. I'm like, these are not men, So I'm watching this.
And Maloney was the biggest man on the European side.
That's a fact. That's a fact. And I'm watching this, and I'm sickened by these, geeks. And then you look at Trump and Putin, and they're like, hey, what's happening? All right, bro, let's do what we got to do. So in one instance, Trump is dealing with people that hate his guts, are trying to stab him in the back, and are just like down on their knees, crawling around like they're in front of the king's court. And what you see in the other one? You see the king from over here and the king from over here coming together to talk about king things. You know what I mean? Over here you see a bunch of compliant court jesters. That's what it was. Jesters in the king's court as opposed to two kings talking. That's the way I see it.
No, that's how the Russians see it too. They have total disdain for Europe today. Total disdain. There's some European leaders of Fico in Slovakia, Orban in Hungary that they respect because they're willing to stand up for their sovereignty. This Serbian guy Vlasic or whatever his name is, they don't respect him too much. I mean, they like Serbia, they like Serbians, but he vacillates. The Russians want consistency. They like predictability. That was the thing. Anatoly Antonov, when he was the ambassador here, kept saying, we don't care who wins your election. That's your business. All we want is predictability. Because with predictability, we can make policy, and then we can sort of find out what we need to do and define what we need to do. But, unpredictability, that creates chaos. It's hard to have policy. That's why the truth is in 2020, the Russians wanted Biden to win. That's the irony of it. Everybody said, oh, Russians are working to get Trump elected. And the Russians are like, that's your business, but Biden's predictable. We know where we stand with Biden. Trump, all over the map, we don't know where we stand with him. Well, today, they realize they have a window of opportunity to have an American president that could transform the reality of Russian-American relations, beyond the Ukraine conflict, because we were headed to hell. That's why I wrote a book called Highway to Hell, because that's exactly where we were going. And the Russians now are looking at Trump saying, he's transactional, he's a businessman, we understand that, we can work with that. But they had to reframe how they evaluate an American president. They don't view him now as a conventional American political power because he's not responsive to the normal, vectors of influence that political people have. He's a transactional guy. He's a business guy. That's how his brain works. So I think what you've seen with the Russians is that they've taken a completely different approach to dealing with Donald Trump. Um, First of all, they understand he has a huge ego, and so they stroke it every chance they get. The very first thing Putin said to him is, "I'm glad you're here," recognizing that had the bullet been a little bit more off, you wouldn't be here. He said, "I'm glad you're here."
There was a message there too. When he said, "Hello, dear neighbor, I'm glad you're alive." There was a message there. There was a message saying, I know there's some bad dudes out there trying to do you bad, and I know you got, there's some people you got to look over your shoulder every day. So, I know what's going on there. Almost like, also like a, be careful. You know what I mean? Like they hate me just as much as they hate you. They might hate you worse, kind of thing.
Well, I think the other message was, I don't have anybody shooting at me, Donnie. I'm comfortable in my own skin, kind of thing. But you do have people shooting at you, and I'm not the guy shooting at you.
Yeah,
I'm the guy wanting to do big things with you. Trump, it was curious because when Putin spoke up at the press conference and said, "Next time in Moscow," Trump first thing was, "Well, I'll take a lot of heat for that," meaning that means Trump is 100% worried about what's going on behind him.
Oh yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And once you understand that, and it took me a while to understand that. I mean, I was aware of that, but it took me a while to realize I didn't think Trump worried about that as much as he does, but he worries about it a whole bunch. And once you understand that, it provides a filter to try and interpret some of the stupid things he says.
Right.
Because a lot of what he says, and the Russians, I heard this from a Russian. The Russians actually helped me with this because I said, well, what about all the statements he makes? They said, they're not for us. We know that.
Exactly.
We know what he wants. We know he has to say certain things. He says, they said it's for the people behind it. So when he threatens Putin doesn't sit there and go, well, you threatened me. I've got to do something. Putin's like, yeah, he's talking to the guys behind him. I'm okay. We're good. Trump and I are good. And I think they are good. I think that Putin knows where he wants to go, has a strategic vision. He's confident that Trump shares his vision, but their respective paths to get to the end are different. Putin's trouble free. Go up there. Trump's got to play these games, got to balance Europe, balance NATO. I mean, Lindsey Graham, I can't wait for Lindsey to, I think he's throwing a temper tantrum right now, and he's got the vapors and he's hyperventilating in his back room. But at some point in time, Lindsey's got to come out and understand that Trump just dumped you by the side of the road, boy.
Yeah.
Be out of the car. You thought you're in the passenger seat next to the driver, and you could reach over once in a while and take the wheel and adjust the direction. Trump just booted you. You're done.
Yeah. And I think, here's the other thing too. Neither Scott and I are naive. We understand that there's various factions in the U.S. empire. We understand that they're up to no good in the Caucasus, and God only knows what the hell they're doing in South America now, and sending, that there's the empire is going to do empire things, right? But I here's the way I look at it, and I don't even do I trust the empire anywhere when it comes to negotiating with them or anything else. But here's the way I look at it, Scott. I always go back to one of my favorite shows of all time, Star Trek. And Kirk and Spock would always do this. This was always the plan. The Romulans or whoever, coming at them with ships and cloaking devices and things of that nature, right? And at some point, things are looking bad. And Kirk would come up with a plan. We're going to do this, and we're going to go into the gravity pull of this planet, and we're going to go out that way, and then we'll fire behind, and we'll get out of here, and they won't blow us up. Spock would inevitably say, Captain, by my calculations, there's only an 11.632% chance of that working. What would Spock always say? You got a better plan? Kirk would always say, you got a better plan, Spock? And Spock would go, Mr. Sulu, full. In other words, we either get blown up or 11% chance is better than none, right? I think that's what it is here. It's like, yeah, I don't trust the Americans. They're up to no good. They're all up to no good. The Brits are up to no good. There's 10 different factions in the U.S. fighting. But if we got an 8% chance of getting a deal with the Americans, it beats a nuclear war. What do you think, Sergey? We got an 8% chance. Mr. Sulu, you know what I mean? And I think that's where we're coming from. Look, everybody knows what's going on. We're not naive. But if there is a chance of avoiding a horrific conflict right now, you deal with that, and then afterwards you move on to the next war or explosion or whatever it is you got to deal with. That's the way I see it.
Look, that's why I can't find the challenge coin, but that's why I started Operation Dawn. You helped with Operation Dawn last year. It's about preventing nuclear war. And just so your audience knows, we kicked ass. The CIA said in the fall of last year there was better than 50% chance there'd be a nuclear war with Russia by the end of the year. And the Biden administration, in a closed-door briefing with senior members of Congress, when briefed by the CIA that Russia wasn't bluffing, that if Biden allowed ATACMS missiles to be launched into strategic depth of Russia, that Russia could implement its nuclear doctrine and use nuclear weapons against the West. The response of the Biden administration was, we're ready for that. We're ready for nuclear war. Well, and people don't understand every war game that's done in the Pentagon. This is why I just wish people would learn more. Every war game in the Pentagon, where they start with, the limited nuclear war exchange, they all end in a full-scale strategic nuclear exchange, and the world ends. Exactly. You can't contain it. Once it's used, it's done. Which is why we did Operation Dawn, to inject a reality, to get Trump. The letter, I'll just state it. The article that RFK Jr. and Donald Trump Jr. published in the Hill magazine in September, which was basically declaring that the Trump administration's priority will be to bring an end to the conflict and avoid nuclear war with Russia, to pursue, peaceful resolution. The first 2/3 of that letter I wrote. The letter was my idea. Part of Operation Dawn. This is what we were trying to do. We're trying to do the same thing with Kamala Harris, but she just wouldn't return the phone call. And Jill Stein at first said she would cooperate, talk, bring it. Then she backed off. Trump was the only one who did it. And then after the election, through Operation Dawn, you remember we had the big event in Washington D.C. at the National Press
Club. Yeah,
and Press Club. That was accompanied by knocking on the door to Congress. I saw somebody like, that's not true. Hey, asshole, I don't lie. Okay, when I say I met with a senior member of Congress, I met with a senior member of Congress. And when I tell you what they said to me, they said exactly what I'm telling you. So I won't say what I want to say, but pound sand. Yeah. But the point is, that's where they said, no, they're ready to go. Buchanan, Rear Admiral Buchanan, told a think tank in November that we're ready to have a nuclear exchange with Russia and win. So with all that, you talk about your Kirk, Star Trek thing. I did a meme. I'm not a big meme guy. I wish I could be better at it. But I did a meme leading up to the election where I used, instead of Star Trek, I used Avengers Endgame. Have you seen the movie?
No. But
Thanos has all the things. He snaps his finger, everybody dies. So they're trying to get it back. And now they're trying to make Thanos disappear. And there's a scene in there where Doctor Strange is like wigging out, and he said, I went forward in time to check out all possible solutions to the problem. How many did you see? 14 million, something like that. How many did we win? One. And so now they start going forward, and then they get to the point in this battle where Iron Man has the glove on, and he looks over and he says, is this it? And Strange looks at him and goes, this is it. One chance. And that's how I felt about voting for Trump, because anybody who's followed me knows that I often say some of the most harsh things about Donald Trump. Yeah. I'm not Donald Trump's biggest fan at all. One chance. There was only one chance to stop this nuclear war that Joe Biden was getting. He said if Kamala Harris had been elected, she would have pursued these policies, and it's a 100% certainty, there would be a nuclear war, and we'd all be dead. So people are like, why'd you support Trump? Because I want to live. And so far, it's working. He spoke to Vladimir Putin face to face. Biden wouldn't. Not after the SMO. Kamala Harris damn sure wouldn't. Trump did. and he's shown an ability to absorb Russian reality. Whatever Vladimir Putin told him in that car got Donald Trump to do a 180-degree flip. No longer talking about a ceasefire, now talking about a comprehensive peace plan. Donald Trump, this whole Project 38 is the idea is to get Donald Trump to extend the New START treaty. Unsolicited, Donald Trump the other day said that treaty can't be allowed to expire. So he's already programmed. He understands these things. One chance. It doesn't mean it's going to succeed. It doesn't mean that bad things aren't going to happen. But Donald Trump's the only man right now, the only person that can avoid a nuclear war amongst the American leadership. Vladimir Putin doesn't want a nuclear war, but if you provoke him long enough, as he said, if the goal of the United States is the strategic defeat of Russia, and it continues to be our goal, Biden articulated vocally, and Trump has not backed down from that yet. Marco Rubio is a big fan of it. If that's the goal, then we have to remember, well, wait a minute. Didn't Vladimir Putin say a world without Russia is a world not worth living in? That you wouldn't want to live in a world where there was no Russia? Just like in America, we're Americans. Do we really want to live in a world where they erase us, where we're no longer Americans or something else? Or is being an American, defending the Constitution, something you're worth dying for, laying down your life? I believe it's something worth dying for. I joined the military to uphold and defend the Constitution. So the Russians must think the same way. And now we have a leader who understands that, hey, Russia was right. How many times did Donald Trump have to say NATO expansion caused this war? I got put on a Ukrainian hit list, the death list, because I said this is a proxy war between the West and Russia, and Ukraine's the tool. And the Ukrainians said, no, you can't say that. We're going to kill you. And they have actually tried twice. The reality is Donald Trump gets it, understands it inarticulately, and he has to wrap everything with Donald Trump. I want the Nobel Peace Prize. I'm the greatest man in the world. I got the biggest hands. I'm awesome. Okay, the Russians are like, we don't care. What we care about is the outcome. And the Russians don't want to die. They don't want to have a nuclear war. They'd like to have somebody they can do business with. And Donald Trump right now is the guy. The guy. He was the only one. There was no one else. No one else. Captain Kirk, Spock. There's 11 million reasons why not to do this. Do any of them work? Nope. Full speed ahead, Sulu.
Exactly. I think that's where we are. It is, it's sadly, everything in American politics are now, and this is what I see, the politics of personality. You like Donald Trump. You don't like Donald Trump. You support Donald Trump. You don't support Donald Trump. Isn't there a thing like small minds talk about people and big minds talk about, I forgot what the other word is, but it is when you understand that it ain't even about Donald Trump. It's about, hey, we're in a bad situation, and how do we address that situation in a way that brings the greatest amount of safety and opportunity for the masses of people. We don't let some idiots drag us into something that gets us all killed. So, and I can be furious at Donald Trump over South America or Haiti or Gaza and say, but right here, we need to do this. Right there, we need to do that. And you can partition things. And I think that's where we are. And, for the people that don't understand that, that's their problem. For the people that don't understand it, screw that. That's their problem. I mean, you just, to me, you ignore those people. I think that another thing, the last thing I like to bring up is this. When it comes to the Russians, I think Europe, as bad as it looks in Europe, and as lunatic as the leaders are, here's the good part. None of them are at 20%. Most of them aren't even near 20%. And I think the Russians also know this. We can ride this thing out about 5 to 8 years. 5 to 8 years. Not only will the Macrons and Starmers and all be gone, the people that come back will look a lot more like a Fico on the left or an Orban on the right. The people that come after them will be a 180 because the European people are sick to death of people who ignore their everyday needs. Now, will it be too late to bring them back? Will they have pissed the Russians off so bad that they can't get any fuel or anything like that from them? I don't know. But I think the Russians understand that time is on their side, and it sure as hell ain't on the side of the Europeans. And I think the Europeans may understand that. That may be why these European leaders are so desperate to do whatever it is now, because they know they're all living on borrowed time.
100%. I mean, look, Putin is going to outlast everybody who's in office today. That's a guarantee. And Russia will be here. Russia's doing well. Russia's, I'll just leave you with this thought, Garland. I've been talking about the family of podcasts, and you have been saying the same thing, how we need to work with each other here. I was a guest of what's called the International Unity Club, and that club brings under it an umbrella of Russian podcasters. And so I worked with them over the course of the week to bring them together as a family to magnify. Because I told them straight up, I said, "You guys suck at information warfare. You really do. You're very bad at it. But get better." But when they said, "What if we bring the families together?" The name they kept raising about wanting to come over was your name. So plant that in your head there, Garland. Maybe we need to bring the family of podcasts to Russia and work on making sure that we both understand each other, both the alternative media forces here in the United States and the Russian alternative media. I mean, because these podcasters, they're not working for a state. These are individual podcasters doing their own thing. They're not anti-Russia, but they're very much an independent voice that needs to be magnified. So who knows? I'm just planting that seed in there.
Sounds like a great idea to me. One last thing I'll say, and I got to throw this out there, and that is, this is Tulsi Gabbard. I don't think a lot of people who are looking at this circumstance realize the importance of what Tulsi Gabbard is doing right now. But Trump could not do any of this if Tulsi Gabbard weren't on the offense against Russiagate, because I will guarantee you, when it came to this, before they were like, okay, you're going to have a meeting with Putin, you can't do it because the media is going to go all Russiagate. Trump, Putin, we knew it. They're up to it again, and blah, blah, blah. And Tulsi Gabbard had to suppress the enemy air fire. You know what I mean? She had to suppress. It's just like, well, we got to suppress that. That's their air defense. They're going to shoot us down with Russiagate. We'll suppress the air defense. She comes in and she releases, look at this, look at what they did, a bunch of lies. Then they come out and say, we're going to start arresting people. I remember when she says, yep, we're going to start arresting people, and the American people need to know why. So she comes out today or yesterday and says, we got evidence right here. Here's the evidence that the intelligence community said the Russians don't have a preference before, and then the Russiagate leaders all lied and said they did, right? So it's critical to create the media PR / political cover for Trump to meet and everything with the Russians and the Trump team, so they can't just take them out with Russiagate again.
Yep. Preemptive strike. Genius.
Yeah, I think so too. All right. Thanks a lot, Scott. Everybody, before we go, don't forget, it is important. It is important. Excuse me. What the heck am I coughing? Am I smelling something weird? It is important to go to scottritter.com and check out his Substack. You can see everything. He's got Trump Watch there, the Russia House, Ritter's Rant, the Spot Rep, Ask the Inspector, all of these things.
Go up to the donation button. I just want to make a point. The trip I just made, 100% funded by me because of the donations that people made. If you want me to continue to do this and have the independence of it and avoid any criticism, because you know the heat I'd take if I came back and said, well, the Russians paid for my airfare, the Russians paid for my hotel, and all that stuff. People go, well, then you're a Russian tool. No, this trip was 100% funded here in America by the donations that you make. And if Garland ever is going to go to Russia, he's going to need help with that too, because we can't. It's not that I don't trust the Russians. It's just the reality of perception. We have to be perceived as, being independent. And we do that. I've been able to do it because of your kind donations. And I thank you for that. And I would ask everybody to support Garland as well.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you, Scott. Don't forget, you can go to scottritter.com for more information. The most important thing you can do is share this on all your social media platforms. And last but not least, if you're watching this anywhere other than on my channel, one of these weird channels that steal anything with Scott Ritter, anything with Larry Johnson, everything that Nima does, everything that Judge, they steal it as soon as it gets up and put some fake background on it. If you're watching it there, then you're supporting theft. And if they're about to stick mine up, I'm gonna file a copyright as soon as it goes up, a copyright complaint as soon as it does. So watch, but yeah, that's what everybody says. Block those fake sites. If it's not on Nima's site, if it's not on Judge Knapp's site or my site, if it's not the original, then it's been stolen without permission. Thanks a lot, Scott. Everybody, share this on all your social media platforms.